Good afternoon, everyone. Europe's losing 1,000 farms per day. Projected declines in Europe are going to lead to cost-pushing inflation wave. Already happening in China, pork 1.7 times more expensive. Look at the harvest in the U.S., dismal in the snow. Lowest planting for hard red winter wheat in 110 years. They try to say it's no demand, but really 2019 corn harvest, look how far behind the harvest is. Soybeans as well, so far behind. Inclement weather everywhere you look in North America, now affecting the harvests. And with talk of trade wars and the Fed lowering rates, talks of stock markets crashing across the global economy, contractions everywhere you look, isn't it time to consider gold or silver? Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated gold and silver IRA dealer. At Patriot, you work directly with an owner and avoid paying absurd broker fees. Call today to request a free investment kit below. Call 1-800-778-4156 for more information or click the link in the description box below. Patriot Gold Group, free gold and silver IRA investment guides. Starting over here at Armstrong Economics, claim is 400,000 farms per year are lost in the EU. Now this is small farms. These are not mega farms, but the amount of small family acreage and small town acreage that's being swept away, and a lot of it's not being replanted. What they're projecting is declines in the EU for agricultural production. Forecasters already calling for food price rises 2025 because of an inflationary wave. Now this is really interesting. I've been saying 2023 to 2024 is when we're going to get amazingly high, huge food price rises due to the grand solar minimum intensification and how the magnetic fields of the sun are going to try to recouple themselves for a few years before they go out of phase again. Which makes me a fan of cycles inside the economic sphere. And it shows a winter type of decline, also measured by the seasons with the economic cycles. Interesting, we're getting into a colder phase. It's called winter going into the declining economic phase, and a grand solar minimum is going to mix it up for everyone. So you really need to ask yourself, who is not going to exploit this inflationary wave or push it, man-made inflation, just to make more money on the markets? Now, which sector do you think will not participate? Governments, companies, house buyers, or speculators? I think maybe the house buyers will get swept out of the market and it'll be left for those three there to compete and push. And who controls food controls society, period, hands down. I'll give you free energy. If you're not crawling off the floor because you're too malnourished, it just won't matter. And a perfect example coming out of China, this pork hyperinflation sends the Chinese consumer prices soaring the most in 7 years. But you have to realize that time that it was soaring the most, look at that, just a fraction below that huge run up in commodities 2007 and 8 that burst the bubble. But if they're already at this high and our global commodities prices aren't this high, there's a huge runaway effect happening in the bubble of China itself. So this pork hyperinflation, unadjusted pork prices have risen 173% on the year to date. That's 1.7 times higher pork price than it was at the beginning of the year. Now extrapolate that out through your paycheck, and if let's say 20 items go to 1.7 times more expensive, what will you stop spending on first? And then trace that back to the economy. We're looking at something like this, wholesale spot prices. Now what happens when it turns into corn and wheat and bread and beans and whatever else, potatoes, and now it's pork and meat and beef? And when it all does this, where's your disposable income going to go? And following along with Martin Armstrong's analysis of the European crop declines and the loss of farms, remember the USDA bankrupted an enormous amount of farmers after that first initial report in the planting season. Everybody across the industry, including the farmers, the producers, people following the news reporters, expected a drop of forecast for production in the United States for corn due to the largest floods ever recorded in the planting season. Yet the USDA came out and said corn production was going to increase 2%. Bankrupt how many farmers? So the exact same thing. More small farms are lost in the United States and Europe. Now it's happening on two continents. U.S. ending stocks, again, reported by the USDA corn yields and soybean outlook. Even with the largest floods ever and the latest planting ever, They still only dropped the ending stocks a sliver. Now, you can't tell me with this much information out there and with this many blizzards rolling over that are so out of season that even in a regular good year, they'd be struggling to get the crops out of the ground through that combine, that really prices wouldn't have risen by now. It's purely nothing more than smoke and mirrors. And good, traders were disappointed that the USDA left production numbers unchanged from last month's report. So we had a full month of reporting on how pitiful the yields are and how small the kernels are, yet their estimates stayed the same. Thank you for this amazing image. So this is what was happening on Halloween. Now we've progressed another week and a half further and there's still no more information, which is shocking for me. And then magically, to explain away why there might be some shortages of hard red and winter wheat, U.S. winter wheat acres set to drop to lowest in 110 years. It's saying because on the average, over the historical look at hard red and winter wheat, that because of higher price for sorghum, some farmers are going to switch over to corn or sorghum, something else that's going to fetch a higher price than this particular type of hard red winter wheat. And I said sorghum. That was a secondary crop they were going to switch to in the grow zones while they migrated it south. And is this in earnest the first claim that they're now switching to substitution crops in different grow zones, but they're making an excuse that they're moving to sorghum? And then the graphic in the article explains it all. The hard red winter wheat conditions last week of October, look how bad it is in Texas, and now just magically they're going to quit farming in Texas. They've been doing it for more than a century, and now they just decide to quit, or they can't grow it anymore, and they're deciding to substitute something else that'll grow in there. And we're starting to really peg it out, which crops are being lost in which places, in which grow zones, and now we're going to start to flip it around. Maybe these European farms are going to go away from wheat and corn, and maybe they're going to switch to sorghum, barley, something else that can be grown as the conditions switch across our planet on the grow zones due to this intensifying gram solar minimum. Graphic here as well, winter woes. Lowest planting of hard red winter wheat since 1909. So now what is it with the American agriculture that it's back century almost in production, yet we have a larger population, more mechanized machinery, everything's supposed to be GPSed and the highest yields ever, yet we're sliding back in time here. 2019 corn harvest, anywhere it's red, is far, far behind normal in the harvest because, well, when you get the latest planting ever and the wettest conditions ever where they need to let it dry almost into the second, third week of summer before they plant, well, maybe it's going to be maturing later. And see, this is the thing. Anywhere it's red was late planting, so it's still not mature enough to go through the regular harvest. Most times it's done a week or so before Thanksgiving, but this year, look at all that's not harvested because it just didn't grow to be large enough to harvest yet. See, and this is where the USDA is starting to operate in the gray area versus what's happening. And soybeans, same thing. They got in the ground so late, they didn't mature, and they were waiting for the last, hopefully, week or two of maturation, but now we got these blizzards on top of our crops for the third time. Those images of what I showed you with the snow and the combine, this next storm, record cold, it's going to definitely have an effect on what is still in these red areas that aren't harvested yet. And another magical downgrade here, Tyson beef plant fire leaves a huge void in processing capacity. The Kansas City plant processed about 6% of the national feed beef, which will be hard to replace. So there again, whoa, hey, supply chain affected. It wasn't that there's not enough to go in the supply chain. It's just something else is preventing the end product, your food, from getting to you. Or when it got there, it's way more expensive because, well, that other thing in the middle of the supply chain didn't work, so now we got to raise the price. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of the video. I'm also thinking about storing food for a longer time. Canning, freeze drying, vacuum pack. Check out the Adapt 2030 Amazon storefront here. You can get some incredible ideas about long-term food storage that I'm also thinking about. The link's in the description box below, and I will see you next time.